Reinhard Heydrich, Heinrich Himmler, the main figure behind the Gestapo and the security, surveillance, persecution, and internal defense agencies of the Third German Reich. Nicknamed by the Führer as the man with an iron heart, in addition to his praised skills for politics and administration, he was a great horseman, swordsman, and fighter pilot. In short, a Renaissance man who gave himself body and soul to the turbulent National Socialist experience. What was this man's life like, and what were his actions that led him to be known as the Butcher of Prague or the Blonde Beast? Join us to learn his story. This is Reynaldo Carrillo speaking. This is the New Encyclopedia, and I invite you to support us by leaving your comments, liking the video, sharing it with your acquaintances, subscribing to the channel, and giving us any contribution that is within your means on our Patreon, which you can find below in the comments. Reinhard Tristan. Eugen Heydrich was born on March 7, 1904 in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, in a city in the heart of the vigorous and thriving Imperial Germany, which amazed countries around the world with its economic and political power and its prolific cultural and scientific life. He was born into a middle-upper-class Catholic family that enjoyed a good social and economic position for the time. His father was a composer and orchestra conductor who founded the Halle Conservatory of Music. His mother was an opera singer who came from an aristocratic family. His first two names had a deep musical and German connotation. Reinhard referred to the tragic hero of one of his father's operas, and Tristan was from one of the most famous works of the renowned Richard Wagner, called Tristan und Isolde. From a young age, Reinhard showed great intelligence and a strong will. He was a brilliant student who excelled in all subjects. He mastered German, English, French, and Latin. He was also a gifted musician and learned to play the violin, piano, and organ. His strict father instilled in him a deep love for classical music and German culture. Reinhard was also at that time, and remained throughout his life, an exceptional athlete who excelled in sports such as swimming, fencing, tennis, horseback riding, among others. Being tall, thin, and blond for his age, he only earned the nickname the Giraffe as an adolescent. His high-pitched voice contrasted with his masculine appearance. All of this caused insecurities in the young man, but he always maintained a defiant and haughty attitude. During his adolescence, Heydrich witnessed the end of World War I, in which Germany suffered a humiliating defeat and had to accept harsh peace conditions imposed by the Allies in the subsequent signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. At the same time, revolts and strikes against the government were breaking out within Germany. This treaty stripped Germany of its sovereignty by imposing harsh economic punishments, the dismantling of much of its army, the surrender of German territories to other countries, while paving the way for the political dismantling of the German Empire and the approval the following year of a constitution that turned the country into a parliamentary republic alien to the political tradition of that nation. All of this fueled a sense of humiliation among the Germans, as well as contempt for the external and internal actors of Germany who were seen as responsible for this. The Weimar Republic, as this period beginning in 1919 has been called, would lead to a spiral of political and social conflict and severe economic hardships in the 30s. Reinhard, who was 14 years old when the treaty was signed, felt outraged by the situation and joined the nationalist paramilitary groups called Freikorps, who fought against the communists and separatists in the street. These groups that Heydrich now belonged to were fueled by nationalist, racialist, anti-Marxist, and anti-liberal ideas. At the same time, back then, many Germans distrusted or directly rejected the Jewish religion members living in Germany, as they considered them responsible for many of the internal disorders of the German nation and the world. The high level of presence that members of the Jewish religion gained in the last decades in German politics, finances, press, and culture, added to the recent events of World War I and the internal revolts in Germany, were factors for not a few Germans to point out this group as a group alien to the country that had been behind the defeat of the war and that had been behind the new political system that was ravaging Germany. And Heydrich immersed himself in all this Germanist ideology. Imbued with this patriotic fervor and tired of that life of shootings and street fights of the Freikorps, In 1922, Reinhard joined the German Navy as a naval cadet. The young and introverted Reinhard suffered from quite a bit of shyness, and his only refuge against the heavy jokes of his peers was to play the violin that he had brought with him to the Navy base in Kiel. He lived in the Navy for many years and had the opportunity to show his leadership ability, his intelligence, and his skills as a fencer and pilot. According to the late Rear Admiral Clay Camp, Heydrich was a man who, in terms of talent, knowledge, and ability, stood out far above average. There he met in the Navy an intelligence expert officer who would introduce him to the world of espionage. His military career seemed very promising, until in 1931 he was expelled for having married Lena von Osten without the permission of his superiors and breaking a previous engagement with a former girlfriend who was the daughter of an influential businessman and military man. Although Heydrich always claimed that he had been expelled for political reasons, Lena was a young, blonde, and attractive woman who shared Reinhardt's National Socialist beliefs. Together they had 4 children, Klaus, Heider, Silke, and Marta. After his expulsion from the Navy, unemployed and disillusioned, Reinhardt joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which was at that time in a state of upheaval in Germany. The party had been founded 10 years before his entry, under a nationalist and Germanist program that called for the unification of all Germans in a great Germany free from Marxism, capitalism, and foreign elements that, according to them, threatened national well-being. The party maintains relatively low popularity until economic and political chaos intensifies in Germany at the end of the 1920s, and the party begins to experience rapid growth. Upon joining the party in 1931, Heydrich is quickly identified as an outstanding man, and there he meets Heinrich Himmler, who had recently become the head of the party's defense squads, the famous SS, which at the time were still a sort of relatively small political militia, but they were about to become the most powerful police and security organization in Germany, with a strong political, ideological, and even mystical vocation. Himmler was looking for someone capable of creating an intelligence service for the GCS and recommended interviewing Heydrich, who in just 20 minutes developed a proposal for the service that made Himmler hire him on the spot. Himmler is extremely impressed with the abilities demonstrated by Reinhardt and adopts him as his protege. 2 years later, in 1933, the National Socialist movement was elected as the first political force in Germany and finally came to power. The Weimar Republic died and the German Empire was reborn. Simultaneously, Himmler's SS began to take control and merge with the entire security, police, and intelligence apparatus of the state. The SS became part of the state, but they were also above it, answering only to the Führer. Himmler was so impressed by Reinhardt's intelligence and loyalty that he promoted his meteoric rise without any hesitation. Now that the National Socialists were in government, the semi-clandestine intelligence service of the SS led by Heydrich became known in 1933 as the Security Service, now an official branch of the state in charge of information and espionage, considered a sister organization to the famous Gestapo, which had also been created that year. Heydrich put all his energy into the project and quickly created a network of informant spies with which he obtained information about enemies and political rivals, including party members. Thus, after Heinrich Himmler, he becomes the second most powerful man at the police level in Germany and a key person in the consolidation and maintenance of National Socialism. During the years in charge of the security service, Heydrich becomes a small legend by very effectively deploying the tasks of the secret police, investigating, repressing, and neutralizing any factor that could destabilize the National Socialist project. Communists, Social Democrats, liberals, pacifists, as well as members of groups considered harmful to Germany, such as Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, members of the Hebrew religion, and even members of the Catholic and Protestant congregations were monitored and repressed. Heydrich also developed a special fixation on the subject of Freemasonry, which was also declared an enemy of National Socialism and social peace in Germany. Heydrich created a special section in the security service to investigate the Freemasons. During those years of government, Masonic paths were closed throughout Germany, and in the subsequent conquered territories, properties of important Freemasons were confiscated, as well as the archives of these Grand Lodges. They were also excluded from public administration, and several of their members were sent to prison, although this policy was relaxed when the war came. By 1934, Heydrich was also one of those in charge of organizing the so-called Night of the Long Knives, an internal purge of the German regime against Ernest Röhm and other leaders of the Brown Shirts, the force to discomfort the Führer for various reasons. By 1930, to discomfort the Führer for various reasons. By 1936, Heydrich's rise continued when he was appointed as the head of the Gestapo, the political and secret police of National Socialist Germany that was attached to the SS and was made up of career police officers and law professionals. Secret surveillance, arrests, and executions were within its power as an organization. Under Heydrich's command, the Gestapo was a feared and respected organ by the German people, and its agents were able to operate with a free hand in Germany and in the subsequent occupied territories. More than just a simple police force, the SS would become the heart and body of National Socialism. And to delve deeper into them, we recommend our video about their leader, Heinrich Himmler. Another striking aspect of his life is that Heinrich is accused of having been one of the organizers of the so-called Night of Broken Glass in 1938, in which, after the murder of a German diplomat in France by a member of the Hebrew religion, riots broke out in Berlin against thousands of businesses and homes of Hebrews. Heydrich and high-ranking members of the German government have been pointed out as the ones responsible for these riots that made international news. However, his involvement has been questioned, with various evidence that the riots were a reaction of the German population and activists that the German government rather considered very inconvenient for the geopolitical negotiations that were taking place at that time, so the high government sought to calm the situation and make a public call for legality. The truth is that this event, whatever the case may have been, was a turning point in international public opinion against the German government, as all the policy of the National Socialists around the Jews until 1939 had been based on official measures within legality. By then, there had not been massive violent attacks, nor confinement in ghettos, nor the forced displacements that would come later. But after National Socialism in Germany finally established peace through an iron fist and through a government management that brought excellent results in the living conditions of the Germans, the war earthquake was about to hit Europe. In 1939, England and France, after rejecting multiple peace proposals from Germany, declare war on the German Reich. Immediately, Heydrich participates in the reorganization of the state security bodies in the face of the looming war, which concludes in the creation of the Reich Central Security Office, which unified all security agencies under the command of Himmler and Heydrich, placing a huge responsibility on their shoulders. The Central Security Office controlled the security services of the German government and the party. Its activities included the collection of information, criminal investigation, supervision of foreigners, tracking of public opinion, and indoctrination of the new Germanist ideal. Its stated duty was to find and eliminate the enemies of the Reich. By 1939, Himmler greenlights a brilliant idea from Heydrich, aimed at securing funding for the GCS operations through the counterfeiting of the English currency. In addition to providing a huge amount of money to the GCS, the mass counterfeiting of sterling pounds would generate inflation in Great Britain. The operation was put into action until 1945, and hundreds of millions of counterfeit sterling pounds were created in the labor camps, affecting the British economy for several years after the end of the Second World War. Another ingenious plan designed by Heydrich was Operation Skoblin, an operation aimed at sowing doubts in Stalin about the loyalty of his generals, through Stalin's hands and allegedly made him intensify the great Stalinist purge. But despite his services in the SS, Heydrich had a call to combat. So in 1939, against Himmler's opinion, he enlists and presents himself in the exam as a fighter pilot, reaching the rank of major in the Luftwaffe. Until 1941, he gets to intervene in around 100 combat missions in the campaigns of Norway and the Soviet Union. After receiving enemy fire in Soviet territory while flying, making an emergency landing and successfully escaping, the Führer orders him to return to Berlin and forbids him to fly in combat again. His victories as a fighter pilot allowed him to obtain several decorations such as the Iron Cross in first and second class. In September of 1941 comes a new turning point for our character. Heydrich is appointed governor of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a German protectorate composed of most of the territories that today form part of the Czech Republic in 39. Before Heydrich arrived, the attacks in 9. Before Heydrich's arrival, the Czech resistance's attacks against the invading government were increasing, so he is given the mission to pacify the Czech region, which he achieves in a short time. There he takes measures to alleviate the country's economic crisis, applies reforms for the unemployed and pensioners, is dedicated to getting the most out of the economic and human resources of the Czech Republic for the German war effort, just as he proposes to rebuild Prague as a German city and connect it through highways with Berlin. Likewise, he is dedicated to suppressing any resistance to the German regime, imprisoning, shooting, or deporting thousands of suspects. This earned him the fear of sectors of the Czech population who nicknamed him the Butcher of Prague and the Blonde Beast. During those early years of war, Heydrich also goes on to create and lead another very infamous organization, the Einsatzgruppen, also called operational groups by their translation from German. That is the mobile squads of the SS that followed the German army in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union, and whose objective was to serve as execution squads against the enemy population. This group is allegedly attributed hundreds of thousands of casualties to prisoners of war and civilians. In 1941, Heydrich, along with his collaborator Adolf Eichmann, is tasked with planning what sectors of historiography have called the final solution, although its official name at that time was the Resettlement Campaign. It is a matter of dispute what exactly the so-called final solution was. Most argue that it was a plan to annihilate all members of the Hebrew religion in Germany and even in Europe, while various historians maintain, and also suggest various documents from Heydrich, that it was rather about the forced deportation of the Hebrews out of Germany to be relocated in a new state of their own in Eastern Europe. Whatever the case, the fact is that during the chaos of the war, the German government intensifies its policy regarding members of the Hebrew religion. From 1933 to 1939, official measures regarding this population were based on their exclusion from public life and government support to encourage the pressure of war. This policy leads to the intention to massively displace them from the country against their will and/or to confine them in labor and prisoner camps. By 1942, Heydrich convenes the Wannsee Conference, where he coordinates with other high-ranking officials the details of this operation. They sought a Germany only for the Germans, and with the arrival of the war, with the Germans conquering territories on both fronts and an uncertain future, it became urgent to accelerate this operation. That's why 1942 and 1943 was the peak of this displacement policy, which would later take a back seat with the imminent German defeat. Reinhard was a priority target for the Allies to eliminate quickly due to his exceptional efficiency. The Czech president, exiled in England, accepted a plan from Winston Churchill to destabilize the regime in Czechoslovakia by eliminating Heydrich, who at the time was also a possible successor to the Führer. This was called Operation Anthropoid. 2 Czech communist soldiers were trained in England by the Special Operations Service. They parachuted into Czechoslovakia and were received by an operations cell that led them to Prague. After weeks of meticulously studying Heydrich's movements, on the morning of May 27, 1942, they ambushed his car. They threw a bomb that bounced off the armored roof and exploded under the car. The explosion injures Heydrich and his driver. Heydrich is immediately helped and taken to a hospital in Prague, but 7 days later, on June 4th of 42, Reinhard Heydrich would die from the injuries of the attack. Heydrich's death was a hard blow for Germany, as he was one of their most capable leaders, and it showed for the first time the vulnerability of such a high rank in the German government. His death was the National Socialists responded to Heydrich's death, carrying out a brutal retaliation against those involved. They also destroyed the Czech village of Lidice, where some of the perpetrators were hiding. Reinhard Heydrich's body was taken by train from Prague to Berlin in a coffin covered with a swastika flag, and he was given a state funeral, which was attended by the entire German high command, including the Führer himself. During the funeral, Himmler gave a speech highlighting his achievements and the great importance of Reinhard Heydrich's legacy to the National Socialist cause. In turn, the Führer, as the final speaker, called him one of the best National Socialists, one of the staunchest defenders of the German Reich idea, and one of the greatest adversaries of all the enemies of the Reich. Simultaneously, many Czechs and Allied leaders celebrated his death. Thus ended the life of the mysterious and feared Reinhard Heydrich. His intellect, his level of culture, and his lack of scruples made him one of the greatest symbols of the National Socialist experience, a true machine for wiping out any enemy. The political stability of the Reich was guaranteed with the services of this master of espionage and political intrigue. His colleagues admired him and his victims despised him, but none doubted the danger that Heydrich's intelligence skills posed to all adversaries of the Reich. This is Reynaldo Carrillo speaking. This is the New Encyclopedia. I hope you enjoyed this video a lot, and I invite you to support us on our Patreon, which you can find below in the comments, and follow us on our Instagram account called the New Encyclopedia.